That being said, we are going to do things a little different today in that we had scheduled not only the beginning of this spring session to talk about a totally different topic that hopefully we will be able to talk about next week, but owing to the war, we want to be sure to give you some updated information, especially in Hebrew, for those of you, whether you're in Israel or watching from afar and are concerned. We have talked about the war or the security situation in the past 2.5 years quite a few times. So again, that playlist on YouTube is going to be a major resource because I'm not going to go over everything. I am going to refer you to go back to our previous lessons there. What I want to do today is go over some important words that are particularly new to this war that started just over a week ago, show you how to access news and information as it breaks. And if we have time, a little bit of lightness of sort of the ways that many Israelis cope with what we're dealing with now, and a very important term that we're going to actually start off the class with. This is also for those of you who are brand new. At the top of the hour, I will stop and answer questions. If you have any questions about this specific class, please put them in the Q&A. Everything else that's not related to this class, please keep it to the chat. At the top of the hour, I'll not only go over any questions in the Q&A, I will also um, tell you more about our Cafe Oleh conversations. On Wednesdays, Mondays are our frontal webinar class. So for those of you who are new and you can't turn on your um, cameras, there's a reason for that. There are 324 of you, which is absolutely amazing. And toda rabah, thank you all for joining. Wednesday is a interactive class. That is where we break you up into small breakout rooms, before which we send you conversation prompts by email that you are able to practice both before and during class how to speak in Hebrew using the topic we're going over today. So if you've never joined us for Wednesday, I highly recommend joining us. The link is both in the chat as well as on the Nefesh B'Nefesh website. With that, let's get started. We are also starting at a new time, which is 7 p.m. Israel time. We're testing it out to see if the early time works for people. And finally, before we get started, I know there's a lot of bits and pieces I have to go with here, but please bear with me. Obviously, if you are in Israel, your safety is more important than joining us live. If you need to duck out, you are not in a safe space and you need to seek shelter while we are still teaching. I'm in a safe space. If you are not, please go seek shelter immediately, following the directives of where you are in the country. Um, it's now 8 days. I'm happy to go over those if you don't know them. If you are not in the country, I defer you to watch our previous lessons on that. But if you are in the country and need to seek shelter, please go do so. This class will be recorded and put on YouTube. Your safety is more important than joining us live. With that, let's get started with today's vocabulary, and then hopefully be able to share with you some other invaluable resources throughout all of this. So first off, like we do in most classes, we usually have a spreadsheet of vocabulary, Hebrew in the middle, transliteration on the right, English on the left. We put in the nikud, the dots and bars that indicate vowel sounds, because we're all at different levels here and we focus on practical issues. So that's going to be very important for you here. In addition to this, I'm going to send you, and it's going to be in the YouTube link that I just showed you. When you go into the description, a whole bunch of other resources that aren't necessarily we have time to go through today. So you're going to want to look over the recording, if not to practice some of the things we say here. Okay, so first we're going to start with probably the most important word that if you haven't learned this word in the last 2.5 years, this is a really important word also about where we are right now. And the word is chosen. Chosen means resilience. And the longer term usually is chosen nafshi, meaning mental resilience. Nafshi, mental, in modern Hebrew comes from the word nefesh, as in nefesh benefesh, right? Nefesh is one of the many Hebrew words that has to deal with your soul. But in modern Hebrew, nafshi or briut hanefesh, literally the health of the soul, has to deal with mental health. Okay, so when we talk about chosen, we're often talking about chosen nafshi, mental resilience, emotional resilience, but it can be resilience in every sense, right? Resilience is not being a hero. It's not being brave. If you are following those people on social media, or if that's your mindset, great. But resilience is really what the vast majority of us Israelis do. right? Which is how do you deal with everything and still find means to go on? It doesn't mean you're at 100%. Today's been a rough day. We had quite a lot of sirens here in Tel Aviv, including one just a few hours ago. That because it came from Lebanon, we didn't get the advance warning. We'll talk about that word in a minute. It's been a long day, but we're still here teaching. That's a form of chosen, right? We're still adhering to a schedule. We're still getting through the day, even with all the other things, even with our exhaustion, our tiredness, our concerns, perhaps, our fear, whatever it may be. Chosen is a really important word that we focus on a lot in Israeli society. How do we get through the day to it? Not being heroes, not being over exuberant or anything like that. Chosen is a really important word. From that same root, remember, because all Hebrew words are comprised of two things, a root, usually of three letters, and a form. We have lots of classes that we go over this all the time. It's very important to understand Hebrew and perhaps change the way you've learned Hebrew in the past. In this case, chosen has the root chet samech nun. And when those three letters are in that specific order, even with helper letters and vowels in between them, it denotes something about strength and a specific kind of strength as we look at words that have the same root, because the root is 50% of the word's meaning. So by extension, any other words that have the same root, we can learn their connection and a little bit more about what these words mean. So I just told you chosen, our first word, means resilience. The same root gave us a word that was very popular about 6 years ago that all of a sudden people learned, although if you have kids or you take care of your health, you know this word already, which is chisun. Chisun is a vaccine. Okay? So already you're learning something about the connection of these words. Chosen, resilience. Chisun, vaccine. Chasin is the adjective immune, as in you are immune from something. By the way, this is immune not just health-wise, but also maybe legal-wise, judicial-wise, all sorts of other ways. And chasinut, immunity. Okay, so we're already learning resilience is related to the words for immunity and vaccine and vaccinations. So we can already understand there's some connection to how do we make ourselves strong, right? Maybe from the inside, maybe from the outside, but there's a connection between these because Hebrew is telling us there's a connection. I'm not making this up, folks, that it shares the same root and all roots are 50% of a word's meaning. It's telling us the connection of these words. A very important question. We've had a whole lesson on emotional awareness. We've done a couple of these, especially after October 7th, especially in the last few years. A very important thing to ask yourself and to ask each other at any time of the day. Ech ata margish, asking it to a male. Ech at margisha, to a female. How are you feeling? Okay. Lehargish is the verb for to feel, and it means to feel emotionally, not physically. Okay, we have other verbs for to feel physically. This is how are you feeling emotionally, mentally. And the way you're going to answer that after someone asks you that question or you ask it, right, is ani margish, male, or ani margisha, female. You'll see, by the way, these are in parentheses. I don't know how many of you are currently in Ulpan or you've studied Hebrew in the past in an Ulpan or in day school or in high school or in a yeshiva or in university or here in Israel. You've never learned Hebrew formally before. Oftentimes, what you learn in formal education is to repeat back the words. And that's great for vocabulary retention. That's not how native Israelis speak Hebrew, right? If someone asks you, or let's say someone asks me, Jay, Jay, how do you feel? Or how are you feeling? I'm not going to say ani margish necessarily. I don't have to. I can simply say ani followed by the feeling. If I want to say, for example, I'm feeling tired, as in I'm tired, I don't need to say ani margish ayef. Ayef is the word for tired. I can say ani ayef. It means the same thing, right? I'm answering the question, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Ani ayef. I'm tired. Okay. Understanding we don't have to repeat all the same words to have the same meaning understood. Okay. So we're going to come back to this because this is going to be part of our vocabulary and conversation prompts for Wednesday's class. And if you've never joined us for our Cafe Oleh conversations, Wednesdays also at 7 p.m. Israel time, highly recommend joining us. We're going to use this as part of our conversation prompts. We're going to talk about some words that are specific to this war. We learned them perhaps last June, but they're really important to go over, especially those of you in Israel and especially those of abroad, to understand how to be in touch with people and what to expect if you are just tuning in to what's happening in the past 8 days, 9 days. Okay. The first is something, again, we've had on and off since October 7th, which is a hanchaya or hatra'a makdima. Both of these, all these words, you probably have heard before or can recognize from their root. Let's start with the first word, hanchaya. Hanchaya is a directive. The hanchot is to direct someone to do something. So a hanchaya, the verbal noun, is a directive. The other word that you see next to that dash here is hatra'a. First off, take a second and try to figure out what the root, what the three letters of this root of this letter are. This word is hatra'a or hatra'a, however you say the letter resh. Okay, the root is taf resh ein. Okay, taf resh ein. Those of you who come from a Jewish religious background or observant background, you know a word that has this root, and it has exactly to do with what we're talking about here. This word shares the same root as the word tru'ah, tru'ah, tru'ah. What is a tru'ah? Tru'ah is one of the three melodies one plays on a shofar during the High Holy Day season, right? Tkiya, tru'ah, shvarim, or shvarim tru'ah, right? Hatra'ah comes from the same thing, because what was the shofar? It was the means by which those who were scouts watching over the Israelites in the desert would be able to give an early warning of invading tribes or some danger impending. Hatra'ah in modern Hebrew is exactly that. It's an early warning of something. It's a warning that something is about to occur. So a hatra'ah is a warning of something happening. And we know that this has to do even more that it's an early onset one because it's called a hatra'a or a hanchaya makdima. Makdima comes from the verb lahakdim, the same root that, by the way, gives us the word kadima, onward, lihit kadem, to advance. Makdima, early. Lahakdim means to become early or to get early. So all this comes together, an early directive warning. Those of you who are in Israel know exactly what this is. Outside of Israel, you may not know what this is because you do not get this other than the emergency alerts that are built into your phone system. There is a way to disable it, but it gives you up to 10 minutes of early warning that in your area, we are expecting the siren to go off. This is not the actual siren. This is the early detective warning system that employs the emergency sirens, emergency broadcast system on your phone. Those of you from the United States, it sounds very similar to the emergency broadcast system or the Amber Alerts you may get in your native state or county. Here, it's a very similar sound. You don't have to install anything on your phone. It immediately pops up if you are found in that area that's detecting it. And it'll have the instructions in multiple languages, including English, which is why I'm not going to go over it here. But your phone will both buzz, it will make a sound, and it will light up. That is not something you can get on one of the apps, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Okay, that is a new thing specifically for Iran because that gives the time in which a missile comes from Iran to here is enough time to give you early advance warning. Because otherwise, all you're going to hear is an azaka. Azaka is short for tzfirat azaka, an alert siren or alarm siren, right? An azaka is an alert. This is the rising and falling air raid siren that you hear in Israel when there's an immediate attack. If it's coming from Iran, you have a minute and a half. If it's not coming from Iran, which like we had, for example, today in Tel Aviv, came from Lebanon, you still have a minute and a half. If you are in the north of Israel, however, you have increasingly less time, sometimes even just seconds, if you hear the siren go off and it's detected from Lebanon. Okay, so all those things, if you're living in Israel now on our 9th day of this war, you're fully aware of knowing. Those of you from abroad, hopefully that gives you a little bit more context of what we're dealing with here. And at the end of each cycle of a Hanchaya or Hatra'a Makdima and an Azaka, comes the Hanchaya, that word again, Hanchayat or Hoda'at Shichur, right? Because as opposed to previous rounds of war, because of the nature of the missiles we're getting from Iran, it is not enough to stay in a specific amount of time in your protective space. You often have to stay longer. Therefore, you will get, just like you got the early warning system on your phone through the emergency broadcast, so too you will get an emergency broadcast that says the event is over, you can leave the protective space. That's called the Hanchayat or Hoda'at Shichur. Shichur, Shichrur, Shichrur, however you say the letter Resh, means to release. Okay? So that is the release announcement that you can now leave your space. Okay. Um, let's go on to some things that also make this war a little different than other ones. So, second. What are we dealing with, especially in the last few days, with regards to Iran? In Hebrew, we call it a til mitpatzel, or a til mitpazel, or mitzral. What are these three words? Til is a missile. Okay, any kind of missile. Mitpatzel means that it breaks apart. Okay, lefatzel is to break apart. Mitpatzel is to become break apart, to become breakable. Means that it falls apart into pieces, which is a very important part of what we're talking about here. Mitpazel, even though it sounds similar, is not the same thing. If mitpatzel is to break apart, mitpazel is to scatter. Okay, it's to scatter about. And finally, mitzral, right, has to do with what this teal is comprised of, which are little bits and pieces that once they break apart and scatter, they go all over the place. What we're talking about here is a cluster bomb, a very, very dirty form of ammunition. Of course, it's illegal, just like all the other parts of sending missiles to a civilian population is illegal. But a cluster bomb is increasingly what we're dealing with, and increasingly why that hoda'at shihul is so important to wait for, because those things often take a long time to fall. And it's important to know that the coast is clear and you can leave. Okay. In general, we're talking about til balisti. Tilim balistim, if I was saying in plural, is a ballistic missile. I'm not going to get into what a ballistic missile is. You can look that up, of course. And then um, increasingly in the north, because now this war is being almost bifurcated into two different theaters. One is the whole country dealing with tilim balistim, ballistic missiles from Iran. And in the north in particular, they're dealing with two other kinds of munitions. One is a til nun tet. Til nun tet. Til, again, is a missile. Nun tet, when you see those two apostrophes between two letters in Hebrew, you automatically know this is an abbreviation or an acronym. This is how we write it in Hebrew as opposed to periods like we do in English and other languages. Okay? Sometimes it's pronounced as a word, sometimes not. And I'm going to show you an example of when it's pronounced as a word in just a minute. Okay? But this is called a til nun tet, which is a til neged tankim, an anti-tank missile, meaning that is a very short range but very powerful missile. Sometimes it can be launched even on one's shoulder like a bazooka, or from the ground like a mortar. But this is a very powerful thing that especially those communities that live right on the Lebanese-Israeli border are getting hit with right now. Another thing that's affecting, particularly in the north, is a katbam. Okay, a katbam, as you see, it has those two apostrophes there between the second to last and last letters. Okay, katbam, this word we say as a word. This acronym we say as a word. Most acronyms we pronounce as a word. In this case, katbam. Katbam stands for, as it says under it, kli tais bilti meuyash. Kli is a vehicle. In modern Hebrew, it's a vehicle. Tais comes from the verb latus, to fly. So a flying vehicle that is bilti meuyash. Okay, meuyash comes from the word ish, man. So meuyash, manned, and bilti, un, the equivalent in English of un or in as a prefix. Put this all together, an unmanned aerial vehicle. Okay, or as we often say in Hebrew, kli tais, that should be kli, Let's change that. Kli tais oyen. Kli tais, we just said, is an aerial vehicle, right? A flying vehicle. Oyen. Oyen, hostile. Okay. All of these translate to, in English, a UAV, an unmanned aerial vehicle, right? Think of a drone. Very similar, usually bigger, usually with some sort of munition attached to it. Okay. That's what we're talking about here. And then we have a word that's also very important to understand. And the news is doing a good job of not belittling it and using words that don't necessarily illustrate how dangerous it is, as example from today's tragic injuries and yes, deaths. Shvarim, resisim, chalakim. All of these have to do with pieces of that til balisti that once it's intercepted by Iron Dome or one of the other things, fall to the ground. Now, when they fall to the ground, they don't necessarily fall to the ground in what we call a shetach patuach, an open space, an unpopulated space. Sometimes they fall in populated spaces. And when we're talking about pieces, we're not talking about little pieces. Some of these are gigantic pieces that can cause serious injury and damage. Okay, so these are pieces of ballistic missiles, and or intercepting rockets. Okay. All these words, shvarim, besisim, chalakim, the news will talk about that a lot. Very important to not go out of your protected space until they all clear because those things take longer to hit the ground. A couple words you're also hearing a lot in the news here in Israel, and if we have time, I'm going to show you the live news feed of Israel's most popular news program happening right now. But in the meantime, we'll go through some of these words because you're going to see them a lot and talk about them a lot. Chadira. Chadira comes from the verb lachdor, which is to penetrate. So chadira is the term that's used, for example, when there's an alert of an incoming unmanned aerial vehicle of a katbam, it'll say chadirat kli tais oyen, right? So we had that word before, kli tais oyen, hostile aerial vehicle, right? So it'll say penetration of it because why? It flies over the Lebanese border, or if it's coming from Iran into Israel, over the border and penetrates the border of Israel, right? That's the idea of chadira. You also will see the word yeri. Yeri comes from the root, from the verb lirot, which means to shoot. So yeri, fire, as in that could be bullets from a gun, gunfire, that could be missile fire, rocket fire, any kind of fire from a munition. And shigul. Shigul is launch. So you'll see this word exactly, for example, when you get that 10-minute advance warning, it'll say on the news, Zuhu Shigurim me Iran. Zuhu has been identified, Shigurim, launches, here's our word, me Iran, from Iran. Okay, so we use this word also to indicate launching of a missile. When you get that 10-minute warning, that hatra'a makdima, you are told to lishhot samuch lemerchav mugan, to stay or linger alongside. Lishhot is to stay or reside somewhere. Samuch le, next to, alongside, nearby, however you want to translate it, is to stay nearby. It's not telling you have to go in necessarily, but it is telling you to stay nearby. As opposed to lehikanes. If the air raid siren goes off, you have to enter a protected space, and that verb is lehikanes, to enter. Okay? And then finally, God willing, there's a yirut. Yirut is the verbal noun, the ing, if you will, of the verb leyaret, which is to intercept. So hopefully there's an interception of a missile from Iran. Yirut shel til mi Iran. Okay? Now that we've gone through words that are specific to this war, I want to go through some important conversation prompts and things you can use on your own, even after we finish today's class. Well, one of the things we really focus here at Cafe Oleh is not just what topics you want us to cover, but to make Hebrew as accessible as possible, no matter what level you're at. So giving you expressions, giving you words that you can use immediately after this class. For example, if you don't know yet, and hopefully you do after 9 days, where there is a shelter in the area, but let's say you have to go to work. Let's say you have to go visit someone and you get stuck. Even before you get stuck, it's worth asking, Yesh miklat ba'ezol? Is there a shelter in the area? Okay, miklat I'm using as the general term for shelter. We'll get into the specifics in this moment, right? Yesh miklat ba'ezol? Is there a shelter in the area? Very important to know ahead of time. Because this is Israel and the 21st century, it's also worth asking, Yesh Wi-Fi? Let's say you go into a miklat. Oftentimes, because of the way they are built, you don't necessarily get um, data and Wi-Fi on your phone that you do walking around the street. Sometimes there's a router in the Wi-Fi, in the miklat, in the shelter, and you can ask people who live there. Maybe it's in the apartment building, maybe it's in an office. Yesh Wi-Fi? Is there Wi-Fi? Likewise important because especially if you're in a public shelter, there are a lot of people. People are going through a whole range of emotions, including yourself. Recognize you're not the only one being affected by this. So also some self-awareness is important. That's on you and that's on other people. So one thing you can kindly ask someone if they're listening to the news too loud, if they're talking too loud, anything like that, and you can't get away from them physically, you can ask if shalan mich. Or if they're listening to something specifically that's too loud for you, efshar lahanmich et ze. Lahanmich means to make something namuch. Namuch means low. And we use the verb lahanmich when we're talking about like lowering the volume. Instead of saying efshar lahanmich et volume, which is long and is a little too formal for everyday language, you can say, Slicha, efshar lahanmich. Excuse me, can you turn down the volume? Right? So that's a very important term. Number two, you can say Efshala and Michetze. Can you turn this down? Referring to the radio, referring to the TV, whatever it may be. Okay. Now let's go through some other things before we get to also when we're talking about shelters. First off, and this is especially good for those of you who are trying to explain what the situation is like in Israel to people abroad, the different types of shelters we have. Those of you who are getting out and trying to find, get some air, also trying to find yourself, what are the protected spaces in Israel? First off, we talk about a milchav mugan. Milchav mugan is any protected space. Milchav is an area in any kind of space, enclosed or not enclosed. Mugan is defended. It literally means defended, but we also can translate it as protected. And tikni, this is a term that's very important nowadays, especially after the unfortunate deaths in Beit Shemesh, where a miklat received a direct hit from a til, from a missile. It's important that you find shelter in a melchav mugan tikni. Tikni means up to code, up to specs, thoroughly vetted. However you want to understand it, it means that it's a not just any protected space, it's one that's built to withstand an incoming rocket. If it's a direct hit, there's only so much you can do, but if it's pieces, if it's making sure you are safe from shockwave, for example, Milchav Mugan Tikni. For example, here in Tel Aviv, there are many parking lots, especially underground parking lots, that are also considered a Milchav Mugan Tikni, but not all of them are. It's important to know where they are. If you don't have that information yet after 9 days, folks, please be in touch with your local municipality. You pay Alnona. The same mechanism in which you pay local municipal taxes will also tell you where the local nearest up-to-date bomb shelter is, up to code Milchav Mugan Tikni. Okay, so for example, here in Tel Aviv, we have several underground large parking lots that also serve as a Milchav Mugan Tikni. That also is a term that's used not just for big spaces, also small spaces. The smallest kind that you can use in this war is called a mamad. Okay, mamad stands for milchav mugan, that word again, those two words, protected space, dirati. Okay, that dalet at the end stands for a dira, an apartment. This is a protected space, a safe room, if you will, in an apartment. A mamak, which is a relatively new term that we use particularly in new buildings, as well as in office buildings, understanding that not everyone will have an individual safe room in their unit, that they'll often have a mamak, where it's the same idea, but instead of a dalid for apartment, it's now a kuf for kumati. Kumati, floor. So this is the case in which you are in an office building or in a new apartment, where instead of each unit has its own safe room, its own milchav mugan, the whole floor has one. So instead of going down the stairs to a basement or finding an individual one, that floor has its protected space, and that's where you're meant to go when there is a azaka, a siren. And finally, a miklat. Miklat is the traditional, old school, still up to code way that we think about getting shelter, which is an underground bomb shelter. If you see the word miklat, which really just means shelter, it has to do with an underground bomb shelter. Okay, that's in the case of underground parking lots or in a building or wherever you may be. A miklat is almost always underground. Okay? All of these are considered tikni, meaning that they're up to code. Yeah, and they have certain building specifications that make them as such. Three important things I want to go over that's also a preview of Wednesday's class. I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of keeping my own chos and resilience up, but also all the different people who live here in Tel Aviv, where I am, or wherever you are in the country, what you do when you're sitting around in your mamad, or in your mamak, or in your miklat. Are you learning Hebrew? Are you keeping up with the news? Are you distracting yourself some way else? Are you not finding distraction? But let's say you're stuck with people you don't necessarily know. How do you strike up a conversation? In Wednesday's class, and I'll repeat this at the end of class today, what we're going to practice is striking up a conversation in the miklat. That may sound a little gallows humor for people, but that is very much the idea in Israel. What do you do in that period? And there are some great viral videos, by the way, of people taking advantage of it. For example, because this all started right before Purim, one guy is filming himself coming down to the miklat every time there's a siren in a different tachposet, a different costume he had lined up for Purim. Other people take a poll of how many different languages people speak in a miklat. Other people bring their dogs, right? Because obviously your pets are important to you and are welcome in a miklat. And one of them actually has become a national star that hopefully we'll have time to see on Instagram in a little bit. But another thing you do is strike up a conversation, especially with your neighbors. If you are in an apartment building and you go to your miklat, what do you say? One of the things you can do when you leave, right? Not during, but once you get the all clear, that hodat shichur, here are some things you can say, right? Be a little human, be a little connective in all of this because we're all going through this together. You can wish someone ad azaka haba'a until the next siren, right? Maybe a little dark for some of you. It's a great way to make it like none of us are going anywhere. So I'll see you the next time, right? See you soon. But in the context of war, ad ha'azaka haba'a until the next siren. Azaka we just talked about, right? A very traditional term that we use, especially in the last 2.5 years, bisorot tovot, right? Bisorot tovot literally translates to good news or good tidings. And it's in the concept or in the context of may we only have good news, right? You don't have to say rak bisorot tovot. You can simply say bisorot tovot. Okay. And then finally, another great one that's had is tachzik, tachziki, tachziku ma'amad. Okay. This verb, tachzik, which is conjugated here, tachzik for male, tachziki female, tachziku plural, right? Mixed gender but plural, comes from the same root as chazak, strong, right? Tachzik is to hold strong, to make yourself or something strong. And ma'amad comes from the same root as la'amod, to stand, right? So when you wish someone tachzik ma'amad, tachziki ma'amad, or tachziku ma'amad, depending on if it's one person or many people and their gender, it means hang in there, stay strong. Okay, another way to think about it is stay strong, but it really is hang in there. Tachziku ma'amad, right? Until the next time we see each other, tachziku ma'amad. A great thing to ask. What I want to do in the time remaining, in addition to answering your questions, which again, please make sure that if you want to ask me questions about what we've gone over or any questions regarding the war, that they're in the Q&A, not in the chat. I want to show you a live stream of the news right now, and I want to show you some viral videos on Instagram that have to do with the war from Israelis dealing with it. So first, let me open up the news. which we've talked about how to access the news in Hebrew in Israel before, and I will share those links in the description of this recording that will go up on YouTube. But in the meantime, let me pull up my, where is it? Here it is. So what I'm going to show you right now is one of the three major TV stations. There's actually now five network stations in Israel, six or seven, depending on who you're speaking to. But the original three, right? The top three are channels 11, 12, and 13. 11 is the original channel one. All the numbers have changed since. Channel 12 is the first commercial TV station in Israel. 11 was a public station. Um, there are since then two more network channels, 14 and 15. Channel 14 is decidedly pro-government right-wing in its perspective, and that's how they market themselves. Channel 15, many of you know from abroad, is I-24. It originally started out as an international news channel and now has a local Hebrew-only broadcast. There are other channels that are considered basic TV in Israel, for example, Channel 9, which is all in Russian, as well as channels in Arabic. But I'm going to show you Channel 12, which is Israel's most popular channel, especially the news. I'm going to show you what the live feed looks like, right? This is what it looks like. Where if you, whether you're watching on TV, in which obviously it'll just be this screen, but if you're watching it on the app, or on their website, it looks like this, right? On the left-hand side, it says Kol Ha'idkunim, all the updates, and it gives you updates as they're breaking. In the middle is the live feed of the TV, right? And what it's, again, when we talk about media literacy, which is a very important class that we do here at Cafe Oleh, how to read the news. So on the left-hand side is all the breaking updates and headlines, and this is the main feed, and right under it has the headline of what they're talking about. So right now, they're taking a commercial break. It says 50 shniot v'chazarnu, 50 seconds and we're already back, right? And then they're taking a commercial break. So they're giving you a station identification. They're showing you a commercial right now. At the top left, it says Chozrim Be'od, and it's a countdown. Chozrim, returning, Be'od, in another, and then 38, 37 seconds, right? This is a commercial that they're showing you. Usually it's a public service announcement. There isn't so much taste for commercials right now with everything going on, but it will come back. Okay, so you can watch this here. I'll be sure to provide you all the links. We've already covered this before. We have a whole lesson just on media in Israel, but we'll share with you all the links to the five top TV stations in Israel so you can watch live. If you're watching from abroad, you should be able to use a VPN, but this is what it looks like, right? Whether you're watching on a TV, on the internet, or on the app of Channel 12, this is what it looks like right now. Okay. I'm not going to hold you more than that, but that's what it looks like. Just make sure there's nothing here. What it says is, החשש לגורלן של שחקניות נבחרת איראן. החשש, the fear, לגורלן, of the fate of שחקניות נבחרת איראן. If you didn't understand from the words or from the picture you're seeing, it's the fear of the fate of the female soccer players from Iran, who just played in Australia. Australia at first did not provide them with political asylum when they asked for it and are sending them back to Iran. They fear for their lives because they didn't sing the national anthem during the game. So that's what they're talking about today, right? And you see this panel of people every time they're leading up to the primetime news, which is at 8 o'clock. This is the pre-game show, if you were, as there pretty much is only news on TV. But this is, again, what it looks like. Okay. With the little time we have remaining, I want to share with you a few more light videos because, again, Chosen is really important to understand how Israelis keep going and how we keep going around the world in dealing with what's happening, right? That we're not watching the news all the time. We know, just like I did, to turn it off. Make fun of it. Make light of the situation. Find a way to entertain each other. So I'm going to share with you a couple clips that show very much what Israelis are watching by virtue of how viral the video has gone, but also a clue into what chosen, right, resilience actually looks like. So let me pull up my own Instagram feed because a lot of these I watch on the loop. Some of these I'm going to need to translate for you, and some of them speak for themselves. So one of them, for example, was from the other day when the Home Front Command, which is the part of the army that dictates civilian life during a war, said that businesses, small businesses that could accommodate up to 50 people and with a nearby Merchav Mugan Tikni and up to specs protected space could open, but schools are not yet open. So what do parents do in the event of they need to go back to work, but they're not sending their kids to school? So this is a great example of it, even if you don't understand the Hebrew. Right? Imam va'aba holchim la'avoda. Mom and dad are going to work because we're allowed. אבל אין מסגרות, but there is no framework for the schools opening. Right? If God forbid there's a siren, you take the baby with you, get into the mamad, take the chair with you as well, get up on the chair and close the door. Tamar, I left you a bottle of milk. If you're hungry, have at it. You're old enough now to know how to reach out for something. And if God forbid something happens, scream really, really loud so that the neighbor hears you, because I really hope that she works from home. Right? Again, part of our resilience as Israelis and frankly as Jews has always been to laugh at situations. Folks, it's okay to laugh. The fact that 62.9 thousand people have liked that video shows that it resonates with them. So if that didn't work for you, that's fine, but understand it works for a lot of people to understand the absurdity of the situation. Why are businesses allowed to be open, but schools not? What do I do with my kids? Let me show you a couple others quickly with what time we have left. A lot of these are very heartwarming. For example, I can force a laugh. I can dance and play the part if that's what you ask. Right? Life continues. Babies take their first steps. One that particularly broke me the other day, if I can find it, is a 4-year-old boy celebrating his birthday without his friends, but with all their neighbors because it's his birthday. You've probably also seen the viral video of the wedding in the bomb shelter in Dizengoff Center. I won't re-show that. One I do want to show is another popular account on Facebook and on Instagram called Statusim Mitzaitzim, right? Quoting or tweeting statuses. And this says, Pikuda Oref hitchil latet hatraot ishiyot lemenuyei hapremium, right? Because when you get the alerts while watching TV or on a computer or on your phone, you get a list of all the different towns, villages, cities, settlements that get an alert. And so some of these you may have never heard of before. So for example, there are small towns that have the same as people's first name, like Ro'i, like Rotem, which are common first names in Israel. And so what it says here in Hebrew is Pikuda Oref, again, that army division in charge of the civilian population. Pikuda Oref, the Home Front Command, has started to give out personalized warnings as a premium service, right? So instead of waiting for your town to be named, you see your name up on the screen, you know you specifically have to go. So Ro'i, it's time for you to go. Okay. show you another viral one. If you've already seen the or heard Israel's entry into Eurovision this year, and Eurovision's a very important contest, and we'll talk about that as the day comes up. This is a satire or a remake of the song.
החל בדקות הקרובות צפויה להתקבל התראה באזורי.
Right, so the song, our entry is called Michelle, singing to a woman named Michelle, but this is to Rachel. B'dakot akrovot, in the coming minutes, you're expected to get a hatra'ah, right? That immediate warning, be'ezorech, in your area.
שפרי מיקומך
Get into a better space.
מיקום מיטבי בקרבתך. רחל, די כבר מספיק לבשל.
Rachel, די כבר מספיק לבשל. Rachel, stop cooking already.
שילכו הציצות לעזאזל.
Your meatballs are going to hell. In other words, you don't have time to cook because the siren's about to go off.
יש אזעקה, רחל, 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 רחל. איי, 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 איי.
Yesh azaka Rachel, there's a siren Rachel. And then finally, because there's always room for dog videos, especially when it's difficult times out, there's a popular account held by a woman, and her dog has become a viral hit in Israel. Her dog's name is Pashosho. It was actually on the news the other day because his videos of loving his time in the bomb shelters for the last 2.5 years have gone viral. So this is one of the recent ones. And it says, Pashosho כשפיקוד העורף סוף סוף אומר שאפשר לצאת מהמקלט. Pashosho, the name of the golden retriever. When Pikuda Oleh, the home front command, finally says that it's allowed to leave the miklat, the bomb shelter. And she says, Mommy, you're going to come back here. You'll soon be back here, Pashosho. And it says, despite that he's in trauma, that there weren't azakot, there weren't sirens for a long time, he isn't ready to give up on any second in the bomb shelter. Come here with me, you'll come back here. There's a chance that even in the next few seconds you'll be back here, but we need to go. Okay, Pashosho is a really big hit, so much so there was an English meme made as well. Right, even with everything going on and all those panelists talking about all the situation, they brought on Pashosho because that helps get through the war, right? That helps talk about when we talk about chosen, resilience. With a little bit of time remaining, I'm going to answer some questions. So first off, toda rabba, thank you all for joining. With the time we have remaining, I'm going to answer some questions in the Q&A, so this is your chance to ask. Again, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Israel time here on Zoom. We invite you back for Cafe Oleh conversations. If you sign up right now and in the next 24 hours, you will get a reminder for our class that will also include not just the vocabulary we went over, but it will have further conversation prompts because on Wednesday, we're going to practice small talk in the miklat. How do you have that conversation? You saw the end conversations, right? How to wish someone only good news or stay strong or see you during the next one. How do you keep a conversation going during that uncomfortable, maybe awkward period in a bomb shelter? Maybe your buildings, it may be a public shelter. How to strike up a conversation. And by the way, practice your Hebrew. That's going to be Wednesday's conversations in your groups that we pair up by proficiency level. Highly recommend all of you to join us for that. In the meantime, let me answer some Q&A. Okay, let me pull it up. Gmishut is not resilience. Gmishut is flexibility. Those are very different things. Okay, great question. Chosen. Chosen is how we say it. Chosen. Chosen. The in this case, the emphasis is on the first syllable. Chosen. Is there a dictionary of root words? There used to be, I think there is still 501. I don't know if that's verbs or roots. There is, I believe, a dictionary out there based on roots, but I have yet to find one that works. Okay. What is the difference between makdim and mukdam? The technical grammatical difference is one is present and one is past. Makdim is the present participle, mukdam is the past participle, but we use them differently. For example, makdim is something advancing versus mukdam is something that comes early. So for example, hayiti mukdam lapgisha hayom. I was early to the meeting today. But ההתראה המקדימה עוזרת לכולם. The early detection warning saves everyone. Slight difference, but important. Is it possible to add the stress on the vocab list? My friend does it by using capital letters. I do it by adding the H to the end of words, but I will take that in stride. I will think about that. Thank you for asking. Can you break up cluster bombs showing what each of the words means? All of them refer to cluster bombs, but I went through them individually what they mean. I'll write it in the sheet before we go out, but all those words mean cluster bomb. Okay, those are the three different words that the news uses interchangeably for it. Um, if you arrive in Israel and use an American telephone service, do you automatically get phone alerts? That's a great question. I honestly don't know the answer to that. It's worth asking your American telephone service if that's the case. But for example, if you are roaming, right? If you have the data to be roaming, you're on and you're from the United States, let's say you're on T-Mobile and you come here, T-Mobile often works with Orange or Golan or even Cellcom. If it says at the top left of the screen that it's flipping over to a local service, then yes, you will get the emergency broadcast system. How do you ask someone to put out their cigarette? Na lechabot. Lechabot is to extinguish. Okay. I've heard misinformation. Are the shelters open to all who live in Israel territory? Yes. The law in Israel states during emergency that any public shelter is open to the public. So public shelters are listed in your municipality. They are also able to find on apps, for example, on Google Maps and on Waze. You can look up miklat or public shelter. But yes, by law, it is illegal to prevent someone from entering a public shelter based on their race, ethnicity, gender, and so forth. And you will get a fine, if not imprisonment, for doing that. 100%. If it is a private shelter, it's a different matter, and the law doesn't apply in the same way to it. But if it is a public shelter, yes, you will see, for example, here in Tel Aviv, many apartment buildings will keep their front door open. They normally would be closed, obviously, but they're open in the case someone walks by and needs shelter. Um, Hold on just a second. What is a floor miklat actually called? The protected room for a building's floor, not the entire building. Like I said, mamak. Mamak. Melchav mugan kumati. A floor-based protected space. It's called a mamak with a kuf at the end. That's in the vocabulary list. Any word for an above ground bomb shelter? There's one across the road from my building. I don't know if that's necessarily it could be the entrance to an underground bomb shelter. They're typically not above ground unless it's a mamad or mamak where it's built into a building and has very specific specifications. Otherwise, it's the entrance to a miklat underground. Hope you show Pashosho on channel 12. Glad I beat you to it. Are there two kinds of siren? How about the radio or something? The siren in Israel, great question. So in Israel, we have the up and down, rising and falling air raid siren, which is the air raid sirens that are posted throughout a given community, right? If you're using one of the apps, either the Homefront Command Pikuda Oleh one or the Tseva Dome app, they have a customizable sound to them. That's on your phone, and that's totally optional to have on your phone. That's recommended if you can't hear your local air raid siren, to download one of the apps to make sure that you hear it. But again, if the missile is coming from Iran, if you are else anywhere other than the north, because the north does get missiles from Iran, but their more immediate threat is from Hezbollah and Lebanon. Um, you should be getting the emergency broadcast system up to 10 minutes in advance warning on your phone, which tells you to already start seeking shelter. Okay, sorry, just 1 second. I see a bunch of questions here. Okay, how do we sign up for Wednesday? The link is in both the chat and on our website at Nefesh B'Nefesh. Okay. How do Israelis rank accents from around the world from specific parts of the US? A great question for another class, but a great question. I love that one. Does tikni come from the same root as litaken? Yes, it does come from the same root as litaken, to fix something, right? If something is tikni, it is fixed. It is up to specs. How do you say to get immunized? Lehit chasen. Lehit chasen, to get immunized, to get a immunization. Okay. Is there anything to follow or watch if I don't have VPN? Anything you suggest on YouTube? So some of the news channels do have a direct link on YouTube, but again, they often are country blocked. So if you don't use a free VPN, you can also sometimes use one of the apps. I'll be sure to send all those links in for the recording that'll go on YouTube. Okay. The video showed parents leaving their babies alone. Again, folks, it's humor. It's satire. They're talking about the absurdity of it, of having forced to go back to work, but their kids are not in school. Okay. Is this class intended for beginners, intermediate, or all levels? Yes. Because we are topic-based here, it's open to everyone. And if you join us on Wednesdays, you'll see that we have proficiency levels from beginners to advanced. Everyone finds a space and a group in which to practice. Okay. What is Israel's equivalent of calling 911 in the US? We have a whole class on emergency numbers, but very quickly, Israel doesn't have one emergency number. You call one number depending on the service you need, but 100 is the police. Okay, we have a whole lesson on that. Please look on YouTube, Cafe Oleh emergency numbers. Okay. Can you make the link for Wednesday conversations similar to the one for the Monday lesson? David and my colleagues at Nefesh B'Nefesh will be able to get that for you. Okay. Does Azaka refer to outside sirens to your phone or both? Azaka is a siren. That could be the one that you're getting from your phone or that. But the difference is this Azaka is the one that tells you immediately to seek shelter of an oncoming missile. If it's here in Tel Aviv in the center of the country, that means in 1.5 minutes. If it's in the north of Israel, you only have a few seconds. That is not the Hatra'ah, the one that sounds like the emergency broadcast system that you have up to 10 minutes to start seeking shelter. Okay. Okay, with that, we are out of time. So like I said, Toda Rabah, thank you all for joining. This class will be up on YouTube in the next day or two. If you'd like to join us for Cafe Oleh conversations, please join us and sign up in advance. We will be back at 7 p.m. Israel time next week, God willing, not talking about the war, but no less important to everyday survival and thriving here in Israel. Until then, besorot tovot, as I just taught you, may we only have good news and see you all very soon. Lihitrot. Take care.